So if I want to bring all the drums up and down, that's drums all. Okay, it's just a VCA fader which controls that. If I want to do all the high percussion, that does all the high percussion. All the low percussion, oh, look at that. All the low percussion, just the snares on their own, and just the kick. That's why I have all those faders set up the way they are. This is a Pro Tools mixing template walkthrough, but you might use Ableton, Logic, whatever it might be, whatever DAW it is, this will still apply to you because I'm going through every single channel strip in my DAW template for mixing and why I set up things the way I do. Now, if you're probably wondering, who the fuck is this person? Who is he to tell me about how to mix a record and whatnot? You're right. Who the fuck am I to tell you how to mix? Mix the way you want to. These exercises of sharing these things with you is about learning, both for yourself and myself. So, with that said, if there's something that you come across that you think you know a different way of doing it or an interesting way of doing it that I haven't considered, leave a comment in the section below. If you like having open discourse about our craft as mixing engineers and developing our sonic palettes and making incredible sounding records, subscribe. So, first channel is my reference channel. Simple. It's a playlist. I put mixes in there. When I want to A/B, I have all my instruments grouped in my mix, and I can solo between them and the reference channel. That's where this template begins, because I like to have this up the top. Just keeps everything easy and clean, and if I want to hide it, I can just make it small, or I can hide it, make it inactive if I don't really want it anymore for the session, or bring it back if I want to. That's my first channel strip, and you know, it's a good one. Okay, next is a folder with all my drums in it. Now, Luca Predolesi mixed Major Lazer, some I think he mixed Fabio Rovazzi as well, some really cool artists I enjoy listening to. And in one of his Pure Mix tutorials, he talks about drums in 3 energy points. And this is how I actually laid out all my drums here. The kick, the low percussion, and the high percussion. I haven't taken it to the same granularity as he has in his mixing tutorials and the way he sets up his mixes, but I use the same premise. Kick, and everything from snare to tom. Kick is just the kick energy, that low end sub energy. The snare all the way up to the toms is all the low percussion energy. And the hi-hats, perks, ride, that's all the high percussion energy. And the reason why this is a really interesting way and cool way to compartmentalize your drum sound is because it becomes super easy to impact the tone of your mix. If your mix isn't bright enough, use your high percussion, bring up the volume of those faders, and you'll just get a little bit more top end into your mix naturally. And likewise with the mid-range, with your low percussion, and the low end with your kick. Now, what are these channels? What are they doing? That's actually pretty important. So we've got 2 kick channels here. Sometimes I'll only use 1. Sometimes I'll have to duplicate out more. Depends on the production and the stems which arrive at my desk for mixing. Lo-fi, I did a whole video on this on TikTok. It's just a really cool plugin. See, this distortion adds 3rd and 5th order harmonics, and it adds a really nice texture to percussive elements like your drums, in terms of your kick and your snare. And I have lo-fi on both my kick and snare channels, because it adds those 3rd and 5th harmonic textures really, really nice in small amounts. SSL channel strip, because it's, how do I put it? You know the story behind this? As an intern, I interned under Martin Pullen at Eden Sound, and he came off mixing on large format consoles into the DAW, into his new space, and he just stuck with working with SSL channel strips because visually it just worked for him to be able to navigate as a tool. And it sort of has translated that into my mixing practices, because I just can simply see, hey, I need to EQ something, I got my EQ section here, my compression section here. If I need to gate something or whatever needs to happen in my processing of a sound, it's just all in front of me and quickly and easy to use, and also it sounds great. A little hot tip with the SSL channels, especially with Brainworks, because these are the ones I've put into Plugin Alliance. With the -6 decibel true peak, it's probably the sweet spot for getting the right amount of harmonics out of that plugin in terms of harmonic saturation. Anything hotter, you risk just going over into digital zeros, and anything softer, it's pretty negligible the amount of harmonics it actually introduces, so it's not it's not really doing so much character to the actual sound. So I usually hit this with about -6 decibels of true peak on my signal coming into it. That goes through both the snares and the kicks, go through to parallel compressors or parallel chains where I'm using again, an SSL channel or the 160, either or. Just this is a channel where I get to explore the tone, the dynamics of the drums, whether I want them more punchy, more textured, more heavy or weighty. I get to just mess around with that in parallel, and that's a really good way, because once I sort of dial that energy in, then I can just blend it in freely as I need to, and that's important. Then from there I got all my low percussion stuff, the toms, a low percussion parallel chain if I want to, the tom verb. Now this is an interesting one. Okay, I've got a reverb here. Where are we? Open up reverb, there you are. But then afterwards I have little micro shift because Phil Collins. That's the reason, Phil Collins. I love cheesy tom reverbs. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm putting Phil Collins tom reverbs on every tom that comes into the studio for mixing. It's just that I like having it there, and I don't always use it. I usually swap it out 99% of the time, but I don't know, I just like putting it on for the shits and giggles, and it's pretty good fun. Then I got all my high percussion, and then the last channel here is a parallel for all the drums to go through, and that has decapitator on it because I love texture in drums, and usually I'll get pretty gritty, punishing this pretty hard, and then just blending it softly in underneath. Next is a folder for my bass. I have 2 audio channels in the template, a mono and a stereo one, depending if I get a stem in mono or a stem in stereo. Just makes it easier rather than having to create a whole new channel or duplicate something. So that all goes there. That goes through to 2 parallel processors. The first one is, well, mainly just for attitude, okay? So if I really want to experiment with the sound of the bass, add a bit of distortion onto it, maybe move it around dynamically by either slamming it with a limiter or using a particular style of compression, I'll do that in this first one. And the second one is if I have a bass that is really monoed in and I just want to get a bit of energy around the sides, well, I've got a parallel processor for that. And typically whenever I'm trying to spread things out the sides, I like to make it texturally different. Just as a point of interest. So yeah, I do have decapitator on here. I'll hit that pretty hard and then add the wider plugin, which will just make it super wide, and all I'm left to do with is blend as much of that width in as I need for the mix. Then moving over, guitars, guitar 1, guitar 2, and a parallel processor. This one I've left blank because often guitars come in really well produced to me and I don't really have to use much effects or tweaking or trying to pull it in. I just leave it there so it's already routed. If I want to just start messing with things, I can quickly just open up those sends like that. The signal starts going through there and I can start tweaking as I need to, but often not really a need for it, I guess. Then I've got the synths here, synth 1, synth 2, a parallel processor. For the synths, the parallel processing I have is very similar to the stereo processing for that parallel bass channel, because with synths, especially in pop arrangements, I find they're important. They need to be heard. They need to be textually interesting, but they can't overtake your vocals, or they can't overtake whatever that lead line is unless one of the lead lines is a synth. Then ignore what I'm about to say. But for the most part, the synths are important. They need to be heard clearly, but they can't take over the mix. That's why I like having a parallel processor where I spread things out to the side. So the main synth energy is as it was in the production, sitting with the same panning arrangements, and then underneath I'm blending in this wacky texture that's just fucking way out wide, and it just adds a bit of interest to the mix, which is really nice. I enjoy doing that. Then orchestral, strings, brass, woodwind, I just put it into instrument groups there, and then again I'll duplicate them out as I get more or less stems, and then I'll just hide the ones I don't need. There's a parallel channel there. Do I use it often for orchestral elements coming in? I probably have to say no. I just have it there because I know if I got rid of it, the next mix I do, guaranteed I'd have to bring it back up again, so I just leave it there. Next are vocals. Now, Background vocals, lead vocals are identical. So what I'm going to do is, for the sake of this exercise, just hide the BGVs and we'll look at the lead vocal. I have one mono and one stereo audio channel. This is basically because I don't know how the stems are going to come in. Sometimes they come in produced in stereo, sometimes they come all in mono files, and then I'll just duplicate these out as I need them. These go out to 5 or 6 parallel processors. I actually have many parallel processors for this. The first one is a reverb, the second one is a slap delay, the third one is width, which is this really cool mod delay with 30 and 60 milliseconds left and right, which adds a nice bit of width to the vocal. The next one is crushing it with a 76, and the last one is shine, which is the Aphex vintage exciter. That's really good if you need some top end energy, some harmonics in the upper end without wanting to reach for an EQ and make everything too bright. You can just throw the signal through an Aphex vintage limiter and blend that into the original signal. I don't use all of these all the time. I just like having them there laid out so I can really add some dimension to a vocal by playing with these, you know, thinking, oh, how shiny do I want it, or how wide do I want these vocals to go, or how much room or verb do I want in these vocals. And then I've also got this parallel processor here with Pultex and a 160 compressor to really just slam some juice into a vocal if I need to. And that is literally mimicked in the background vocals here, the exact same 6 parallel processors I'll use on my vocals. Then the effects is effects 1, effects 2. Basically, if I get one shots or rises or effects channels sent to me as stems, they'll drop into there. Then I have all the effects channels buses or auxiliary channels for the drums, the snare, the guitar, the synths, and the orchestral parts. And basically, it's just sequenced in 2. So for each of them, the first channel is a reverb, the second channel is an echo or delay, and I just use Vintage Verb and Echo Boy across all of them because I know those plugins really well. I can pull a sound from them really quickly, really easily, and just makes my life easy. So then if I want something, I just send it there while I'm mixing. I'll safe solo it, so that way if I'm soloing the element, I can still hear the reverb, and that's that. Now we get to some interesting stuff. In terms of controlling my mix after I've set initial levels, I have all VCA faders in this folder, which is pretty cool. So I can control all the levels with this VCA fader here for VCA all, and that's all my instrument faders. I can control all the effects and parallel processing because my parallel processing tends to impart a sound on the record. I'm not necessarily changing the balance of the mix, I'm just adding tone, adding texture, creating layers, creating depth. Sometimes I might want more of that across the whole thing, and I can just add more effects in or drop the effects back, and that's really cool. A fader for all my lead vocals, a fader for all my background vocals, a fader for all the orchestral, synth, guitar, bass, drums, high percussion, low percussion separately. Remember that conversation we had at the start of this journey through my template? Because if I want more high percussion, I can just pull all the high percussion up together. If I want all low percussion, I can just put that together. The snare, the kick, and those are all VCA faders. So don't mistake those for buses. That's really important. These are faders which control groups of instruments. So I'll show you what I mean. I'll bring let's bring all you guys across. Let's look at the drums, because the drums are probably the most dense in terms of layers and instruments and sound sources when it comes to manipulating the gain structure of it. So let's throw that in there. Okay, so if I want to bring all the drums up and down, that's drums all. Okay, it's just a VCA fader which controls that. If I want to do all the high percussion, that does all the high percussion. All the low percussion, oh, look at that. All the low percussion, just the snares on their own, and just the kick. That's why I have all those faders set up the way they are, so that way I can just control sections of a mix with simple faders without actually fucking, how do I put this, just fucking up the mix. I can just simply control the elements from within here. Then I have this really cool layout with what I call the printers folder, and basically what that is I'll just make that all active. Make active, please. That is all of these channels. A little Easter egg here for you guys. have sends, and all of these sends go to these print channels. So sends F to J are for all my printing. And what do I mean by printing? Well, sometimes my clients, they want remix stems, or stems for performances, or stems for mastering. And these are all the stems they could ever ask for a project. And basically I input, enable, monitor them, hit the record button, and these, when I play it back, will actually track audio files for each of those stems which my clients are requesting or needing. That's like a highlight feature that I put in my template recently. So let's make that inactive. There's no need to see that anymore. And then my last one are all my output buses. So what I have is a mix print. So that is where all this mix goes through my mixing print, which will print a raw mix. Then that will go through to a master print. So if I want to put any processing on there, I can put the processing on the mix print in terms of on the inserts there, which happen post record, and then record a master print with all my mix bus processing on. Then in parallel with that, I have a print that I can do without the lead vocal for TV mixes, and a print that I can do for instrument only without all the vocals. And again, you know what that is? That is all these sends from F to J, which I've routed to those print folders. And it works amazingly. The final thing is my master fader that has isotope inside on it. This is a real godsend in terms of just being able to keep an eye on everything, make sure I'm not peaking, make sure I'm not going over zero. Super easy. So that was fun going through that. I'm actually really happy I did this, because I wanted to do this video so long ago, but I was always like, oh, nobody's gonna like enjoy it, and it's just gonna be shit. And oh no, I shouldn't talk like that. This for me was cool to do, because I saw a few things you might not have seen where my routing was a little bit off in this template, and I have experienced it while I've been mixing where I've had to fix a few things. But nonetheless, that's my mixing template. With that said, there's a link in the description below. If you want it, go get it, okay? Now, until next time, take care.